Hi all, I began some very general questions about phonology, kind of just problems getting started. And so I want to give you a couple of ways to think about language phonologically. Okay, so and then you can ask me more specific questions. I'd be happy to make videos for specific issues. Basically, what we're looking at in this chapter, in chapter 3, is moving from phonetics to phonology. We're talking about then phonemes and allophones. And then we move into syllables, and then we move into features. Okay. Now I know that syllables and features are complex ideas, but the most important thing is that first half of the chapter where we're really just talking about moving from phonetics to phonology. And I think maybe we're getting stuck because of a couple of things. So the first thing I want you to think about are the minimal pairs. So a minimal pair is basically when different sounds occur in the same phonetic environment. So think about the words hat, cat, fat, sat, mat, that. All these words show a different initial consonant sound in the same environment, right? And that environment is represented, let me find something to write on here. That environment is represented by the number sign indicating, right, number sign indicating the beginning of the word, then a space where our sound goes, and then the sound that follows that, which in this case is the A, right? So in that spot, right, and we can even put the T after, so just so you can see it, right? But that's not actually part of the environment, right? Part of the environment, right? So we could put the K for phonetic transcription of cat. We could put the V for vat. We could put the S for sat. We could put the H for hat, right? All those are different sounds that can occur in the same phonetic environment. That's how we write our phonetic environment, okay? So what we can see is that when those different sounds can go in the same environment, then they have what we call an overlapping distribution. That is, they occur in the same. We overlap them, right? We have this environment, phonetic environment. All these different sounds can be in that same spot. They're overlapping one another, right? So we know that we cannot predict why or how, what sounds can occur in that spot, okay? Because from our data set of hat, fat, sat, vat, mat, we cannot predict why we use an M instead of an S. All we can say is that these are minimal pairs because they are overlapping sounds that result in different meanings, okay? And so we can't write a rule for that. We don't have to worry about that. We just have to identify the minimal pairs. So those are all minimal pairs, okay? And for minimal pairs, once again, we don't have to write rules, okay? So don't get confused about that. In order that we say that they are different phonemes. They're allophones of different phonemes. And when they're of different phonemes, that means we don't have to write any rules. If they're allophones of the same phoneme is when we can write rules. So a really good example, one that's familiar if you think about it to all of you, is the plural S that comes at the end of English words. So we would say that phoneme is S. Now notice that phonemes we write in slash marks. And the phoneme is the most commonly used version of that sound, okay? And that's the S sound, okay? But when we think about plurals, as we know from our quiz last chapter, the final S isn't always an S sound. Sometimes it's an S sound. Sometimes it's an S, like in lips. Sometimes, though, it's a Z sound, right? Like globes, or in our quiz last time, ones, right? And sometimes it's an EZ sound, as in like churches or bridges. You notice that final sound? And so we say that phoneme S has the allophones S, Z, and EZ. Okay? So phoneme and allophones. Now, if we have allophones of the same phoneme, we should be able to predict why those sounds are different. That is, looking at our phonetic environments, where these are phonetic environments, how we write it. This is the beginning of a word, where the sound comes, and the sound that follows. So doing the same thing for plurals, we should be able to understand that. So if we have lips for our first one, we see that it comes, the S follows the P sound, and it's at the end of the word. If we use, for example, globes for our Z sound, we have it ends in the B sound and at the end of the word. And if we have, say, I don't know, let's say churches, for example, or here's an easy one. Let's find an easy one. Garages, right? So garages, we have our ending sound, right? It's at the end of the word, and it follows that. Okay. So our phonetic environments might look something like this, right? Right. So we have a P, then the sound for lips, right? The sound goes at the after the P, and that's in the word, right? For globes, it follows a B, and that's the end of the word. For garages, it follows a J sound, and it's at the end of the word, okay? So these are phonetic environments. Obviously, we would want to use a bigger data set to really evidence this. So what we have to do is think about, well, what are the differences between these phonetic environments that might account for these differences? So we can see from the first one, it's a voiceless consonant sound, okay? So the voiceless sound P, right? P, 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 P is voiceless, right? And so it's followed by the S sound, okay? In this, okay, and then we have the B, 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 which is a voiced consonant, is followed by a Z sound, which is also voiced, right? So the S is unvoiced, following voiceless consonants. The Z is voiced, following voiceless consonants. And when we have these other sounds like the N and S, Z, the SH, the J sound, the Ch sound, and the J sound, we have a special ending for plurals which requires another syllable. And it could be written as I did here, EZ, it could be an IZ, it could be a UZ, depends on your pronunciation. Okay? So how do we write a rule then for these? Okay? So our rules, our generalizations are basically rules in regular language. Our generalizations then are that the S sound, or the voiceless plural, right, follows voiceless consonants at the end of words to form the plural. Okay? Then for the Z sound, the Z, which is a voiced plural, right, follows voiced consonants at the end of words to form the plural. Okay? And the EZ or IZ or UZ, depends how you pronounce things. If you say garages or garages or garages, it depends on your pronunciation, right? Follows these other sounds, right? Which we can describe in what way? We need to think about what that is, right? So these are what we call other consonant sounds right now, okay? Other consonants at the end of the word form the plural, okay? Now we're of course ignoring other plurals, the irregular plurals like foot to feet or mouse to mice or woman to women, because they are actually different phonemes and they overlap and there's no way to predict them. Mainly because they're forms we inherited from other languages. However, we can now write our rules. Now our rules are basically just taking this information, our generalization, and putting it into phonological rule format. So phonological rule format does two things. It first shows the phoneme. It says the phoneme S, right? And then it says what the phoneme will become. It makes an arrow and it says the phoneme will become, for example, the S sound. Notice that phonemes and then phonetic transcription for our allophones, right? And then we say in what environment. And so we can actually write all the voiceless consonants, for example, in our rule. And our voiceless consonants are P, T, K, and F. And at the end of words, okay? So, right, so our rule might look something like this, okay? Now, what this basically gets you through the first half of the book, I think. And my example where I walk you through how to do a phonology problem, and the example in the appendix at the end of the chapter where it walks you through doing a different phonology problem, should hopefully get you to this point. The next steps are a little bit more difficult because what we're talking about here are not only word boundaries, like we have this symbol here at the end for a word boundary, right? But also we can find different phonetic environments with syllable boundaries. And syllable boundaries are marked with that syllable sign. Whoops, I made it kind of messy, but you can, the syllable sign, to mark the syllable sign. And then we can also recognize that these letters share different features, okay? And so when you talk about the syllables, what you're really doing is you're taking the regular syllables like we use all the time when we talk about syllables when we were little kids. We sound it out like excited. That's 3 syllables. Ex, sight, and id, or tid, depends how you say it, right? So you break your syllable. And the syllables then can be broken down into their nucleus, which usually comes around a vowel, but there are some consonantal sounds that are sonorant enough to be vowel to act as nuclei for syllables. We read about that a little bit in our phonetics chapter, right? So when you look at syllables, first thing about, okay, learn how to break down the syllable. Okay, so the syllable has a nucleus, an onset, which are the sounds that come before the nucleus or before the vowel, and the coda, which comes after the vowel, okay? But then, once you're doing phonology problems and they ask you perhaps about sounds that occur in different syllables, you can start to consider the ways in which syllable boundaries or the appearance of particular sounds in the coda or in the onset affect the phonetic environment. So it's just a way of looking at phonetic environment from a suprasegmental way. So we're looking at one level above the segment, the single sound, right, is looking at groups of sounds, and our smallest group of sounds is the syllable, okay? So that's all you're doing. So as long as you feel comfortable recognizing that the parts of a syllable, do not get frustrated if you cannot apply that yet to phonetic environments, to describing the ways in which sounds happen. It's a very complex process, and this is an introductory class. So I just want to introduce you to the idea, but the important thing is that you master looking at regular phonetic environments and being able to write rules for those allophones, okay? Syllables just give us a more specific, a more precise way of describing some different phonetic environments. The same thing is true of features. So what features allow us to do is, instead of saying, for example, in our S rule, instead of writing this out, we could put voiceless consonants. The features rule shows us that different consonants and different vowels share different features that create natural classes. So voiceless consonants is one of those classes, but there are a lot of different ones. And so it's going to write, that section of the book walks you through how to identify those features. Now, what's really helpful for you right now is there are already, since we're only going to work on features with English, there are already charts in your book that lay out the features in relationship to every consonant sound and every vowel sound that you will work with. So use those charts as reference charts, and what that will do is give you a little bit of an understanding about features so that if you take a more advanced phonology class, you'll already know what they are going in. But once again, like syllables, don't feel frustrated if you have trouble identifying or marking out all the pluses and minuses with features. And rely heavily on those charts. I think they're on 96 and 97. Let me double check that. Oh no, they're later. They're 96, 97. Oh, no, they're not. Let's see. Yeah, so here are the charts, right? So here is they are 96 and 97. So there's your chart of consonants. And basically you have all your features for your major class features, your minor features, your laryngeal features, which is basically your voicelessness, your openness of your glottis, and your place of articulation features, which refer to your tongue and what part of your tongue is used. And they're also organized by their phonetic breakdown, their manner of articulation breakdown. So we have them breakdown by stops, fricatives, affricates, nasals, liquids, glides, and glottals. And so you can really, for that section of the homework, look them up, because just playing with them, just using them, is going to help you grasp the concept of features. Okay, the same thing is true, right, of our vowels. Okay, so all the work is done for you in identifying what they are. So use that reference to help you figure that out, and then use your natural class to represent different rules. So instead of writing out P, T, K, F, or calling them voiceless consonants, you can find the ways in which they all go together. B, T, K, F, right? F's a fricative, for example, right? So normally we're talking about manner of articulation. It wouldn't refer to the same class, but we see that because they're all voiceless and they're all consonantal, they're all negative for sonorant, they're all negative for syllabic, they're all negative for nasal. They share a lot of other features that make up that class, and we can chart out that class in what they call a matrix, which is that group of these features with pluses or minuses. Okay, so I know it's a lot to take in, it's confusing, but you can manage it. Semi-specific questions.